Nothing breeds insomnia quite like a wife who suddenly discovered the joy of late projects 4 nights running. That, or the gas station coffee I'd been mainlining to stay awake long enough to catch her in whatever web she was spinning. I sat in our cramped kitchen at 11:47 p.m., watching the fridge's fading light bulb flicker like a strobe at some discount nightclub. The Victorian house we'd bought 3 years ago was supposed to be our dream home. Now it felt more like a mausoleum for a marriage that had flatlined somewhere between Nola's promotion to senior recruiter and her sudden interest in team-building exercises that apparently required designer lingerie. The buzzing sound cut through my bitter thoughts like a chainsaw through silence. Nola's phone, not her usual iPhone, but a sleek black Android I'd never seen before, vibrated against the granite countertop we'd fought over during the kitchen renovation. The screen lit up with a message that made me freeze. "You up? Missing you already? Can't wait for tomorrow's meeting. E." I stared at the phone like it might explode. My hands shook as I reached for it, then pulled back. Some doors, once opened, slam shut on your fingers and never let go. The front door clicked open. I shoved the phone back where I'd found it and grabbed my coffee mug, trying to look like a man who definitely hadn't just discovered his wife's secret communication device. "Porter, what are you doing up?" Nola's voice carried that particular strain of someone who'd been caught but wasn't sure how badly. I turned around slowly, taking in the sight of my wife of 8 years. Her auburn hair was mussed in a way that suggested hands other than her own had been running through it. Her blouse was buttoned wrong, one hole off, creating a subtle but telling asymmetry. Most damning of all, her skirt was twisted, the side seam running down her front like a neon sign advertising infidelity. "Couldn't sleep," I said, forcing my voice to stay level. "You know how it is when your brain won't shut off. Speaking of which, interesting look you've got going there. That why your skirt's on backward." Her hand flew to her waist, fingers fumbling to straighten the fabric. It's been a long day. Client dinner ran late." "Must have been some dinner. What time did it end?" "Around 10:30. She moved toward the stairs, clearly hoping to escape this conversation. "I'm exhausted. We can talk tomorrow." "Sure thing. Just one quick question. How was the food at whatever restaurant serves dinner until 10:30 on a Tuesday in this town?" She froze halfway to the staircase. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. Just wondering where a person goes for a business dinner that keeps them out past 11 on a weeknight. You know me, always curious about the local dining scene." Her laugh sounded like glass breaking. "Porter, you're being paranoid. I told you, it was work stuff. Boring recruiter talk you wouldn't understand. Try me. I'm more interesting than you think." But she was already climbing the stairs, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a countdown timer. "I'm going to bed. We'll talk in the morning." I waited until I heard our bedroom door close, then counted to 60. The house settled around me with the particular silence that comes when someone upstairs is trying very hard to be quiet. Moving carefully, I made my way to Nola's home office, a converted sunroom where she kept her laptop and files. The door was unlocked, which struck me as either supremely confident or incredibly stupid. Her MacBook Pro sat closed on the glass desk, power cord snaking down to an outlet behind her chair. I opened it, expecting to find a password screen, but it woke up immediately to her desktop. Either she'd forgotten to log out, or she'd gotten careless in her rush to get upstairs. I sat down in her ergonomic chair and started clicking through folders. Most were work-related, candidate profiles, client information, recruitment strategies. But buried in a folder labeled Personal Development was a subfolder called Project Management. My cursor hovered over it for a long moment. Once I clicked, there would be no going back to blissful ignorance. No more pretending that late nights meant dedication to her career, or that new lingerie was a surprise for me. I clicked. The folder contained dozens of files. Email screenshots showing flirtatious exchanges with someone named Ethan Blume, hotel receipts for places I'd never been, restaurant bills for romantic dinners I'd never shared. But the file that made my stomach drop through the floor was a video labeled Conference Room C After Hours. I double-clicked it. The video was clearly shot on a phone, probably by Nola herself based on the angle. It showed her and a man I didn't recognize in what appeared to be an office conference room. The man was younger than me, maybe early 30s, with the kind of carefully styled hair that screamed, "I spend more on grooming products than most people spend on groceries." They weren't having closeness, but they might as well have been. The intimacy in their body language, the way his hands moved across her back, the soft laughter between kisses, it was more devastating than any pornographic video could have been. This wasn't just physical. This was emotional betrayal in high definition. I closed the laptop and sat back in the chair, staring out the sunroom windows at our neighbor Mrs. Callahan's house. Her porch light was still on, and I could see her silhouette moving around her kitchen. Some people couldn't sleep either, apparently. The smart thing would have been to confront Nola immediately, march upstairs, throw the evidence in her face, and demand an explanation. But I'd spent 12 years in supply chain consulting, and the first rule of any good audit was simple. Gather all the data before you start drawing conclusions. I pulled out my own phone and started taking pictures of the screen, documenting everything I'd found. If this was going to be a war, I intended to win it. By the time I finished, it was nearly 2 a.m. I closed the laptop, made sure everything looked exactly as I'd found it, and headed back to the kitchen. Nola's secret phone was still on the counter. This time, I didn't hesitate. I picked it up and scrolled through the message history with E. The conversation went back months. Intimate good morning texts, complaints about boring meetings, plans for lunch dates and evening consultations. Most damning were the recent messages about a weekend trip to Portland that I now realized had coincided with Nola's supposed recruiting conference. I memorized Ethan's phone number and put the device back exactly where I'd found it. Walking back to the living room, I settled into my recliner and stared at the ceiling. 8 years of marriage, and it had come to this, sitting alone in the dark, planning my next move like some kind of domestic spy. But as I sat there, something shifted inside me. The crushing weight of betrayal began to transform into something sharper, more focused. Anger, yes, but also a cold determination that surprised me with its intensity. I'd always been the steady one in our relationship. The reliable husband who fixed leaky faucets and remembered anniversaries. The guy who never made waves, never caused drama, never fought back when life decided to kick him in the teeth. Maybe it was time to change that. I pulled out my phone and started making notes. Names, dates, places, evidence that would need to be gathered, people who would need to be contacted. If Nola wanted to play games, I'd show her what happened when someone with my particular skill set decided to conduct a thorough audit of her life. The fridge light flickered one more time, then faded completely, plunging the kitchen into darkness. Somehow, that felt appropriate. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in weeks. Guess I just found tomorrow's project. The next morning arrived with the kind of gray drizzle that makes Boston-area suburbs look like the set of a depression medication commercial. I'd managed maybe 2 hours of sleep, but adrenaline had kicked in somewhere around dawn, leaving me more alert than I'd felt in months. Nola came downstairs at 7:15, dressed in a navy blue suit that I'd never seen before. She moved through her morning routine with the mechanical precision of someone trying very hard to act normal. "Coffee's fresh," I said from my position at the kitchen table, where I'd been sitting with my laptop and a notepad covered in what probably looked like work notes. "Thanks." She poured herself a travel mug, added cream and sugar with shaking hands. "About last night. What about it? I think we should talk. Maybe this weekend when we both have time to really focus." I looked up from my laptop and smiled. "Absolutely. I think we have a lot to discuss." Something in my tone made her pause, coffee mug halfway to her lips. "Porter, is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect. Why wouldn't it be?" She studied my face for a long moment, then shook her head. "You're acting strange." "Strange how?" "I don't know. Different. Like you know something I don't." I closed my laptop and stood up, moving close enough to smell her perfume, a scent I didn't recognize. "What would I know that you don't, Nola? We tell each other everything, right?" Her face went pale. "Of course we do." "Good. Then we're on the same page." I kissed her forehead, tasting the bitter irony. "Have a great day at work. Say hi to everyone for me." After she left, I sat back down and opened my laptop to the document I'd started the night before. At the top of the page, in bold letters, I'd written, "Project Nola, complete audit." The first item on my list was simple: secure the evidence. I spent the next hour photographing every file on Nola's laptop, uploading everything to a cloud storage account she didn't know existed. The video of her and Ethan got special treatment. I made multiple copies and saved them with timestamps and metadata intact. Next, I called my bank. "Hi, this is Porter Kellor. I need to make some changes to my accounts." 20 minutes later, I'd moved our emergency fund, $15,000 that Nola barely knew existed, into a personal checking account with only my name on it. I also removed her access to my business credit card and changed the passwords on all our shared online accounts. If she was planning to leave me for Ethan, she wouldn't be taking half my assets with her. Item 3 on my list required a drive across town to Gold's Gym, where my old friend Roddy worked as a trainer. I'd met Roddy in college, where he'd been studying criminal justice before deciding that the military offered better opportunities for someone who enjoyed controlled violence. After 2 tours in Afghanistan, he'd come home with a chest full of medals and a complete inability to tolerate bullshit from anyone. I found him in the free weights section, spotting a college kid who was trying to bench press about 50 pounds more than his frame could handle. "Easy there, Superman," Roddy was saying. "Nobody's impressed by a torn pectoral muscle." He looked up as I approached, his scarred face breaking into a grin. "Porter Kellor, what brings you to the temple of sweat and broken dreams?" "I need to talk to you, privately." The grin faded. Roddy had always been good at reading people, and whatever he saw in my expression made him nod toward his office. "Take 5, kid," he told his client. "Practice your form with the empty bar." His office was a cramped space filled with anatomy charts and motivational posters that looked like they'd been designed by someone with anger management issues. Roddy closed the door and leaned against his desk. "All right, what's eating you?" I told him everything. The late nights, the secret phone, the video, the evidence I'd gathered. Roddy listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "So what do you want to do about it?" he finally asked. "I want to destroy them, both of them, but I want to do it smart." "Define smart." "No violence. Nothing illegal. Nothing that comes back on me. I want them to lose everything that matters to them, and I want them to know I'm the one who made it happen." Roddy smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Now you're talking my language. What do you need from me?" "Muscle. Not for fighting, but for intimidation. And maybe some of that investigative training you picked up in the service." "Consider it done, but first we need more intel. You said this Ethan works at Nola's company?" "Yeah, some kind of project manager." "Then we need to know everything about him. His weaknesses, his secrets, his pressure points. You can't destroy an enemy you don't understand." I pulled out my phone and showed him Ethan's number. "Think you can work with this?" Roddy's grin widened. "Brother, I can work miracles with a lot less." That evening, I was back home by 6 p.m., sitting in the living room with a beer and the newspaper when Nola walked through the front door. She looked surprised to see me. "You're home early," she said. "Finished my reports ahead of schedule. Thought we could have dinner together for once." "Oh." She set down her purse and coat, moving with the careful precision of someone navigating a minefield. "I actually have plans tonight." "Work thing?" "Another client dinner?" "Team building exercise. Escape room downtown, then drinks afterward." I nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds fun. Who's going?" "Just a few people from the office. You wouldn't know them. Try me. I'm always interested in meeting your colleagues." She rattled off a few names, including Ethan Blume. The way she said his name, casual, throwaway, like he meant nothing to her, was almost impressive in its calculated deception. "Well, have fun," I said. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." She kissed my cheek and headed upstairs to change. While she was gone, I checked her secret phone. Sure enough, there was a message from Ethan. "Can't wait for tonight. Booked us a room at the Marriott downtown. Tell Porter you'll be late." I took a picture of the message, then deleted it from the phone. 20 minutes later, Nola came back downstairs wearing a black dress that I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Don't wait up," she said. "These things tend to run late." "I'm sure they do." After she left, I called Roddy. "It's me. They're at the downtown Marriott tonight. Room's probably under Ethan Blume." "Want me to pay them a visit?" "Not yet, but I want photos. Them going in, coming out, whatever you can get without breaking any laws." "Consider it done. What about you?" "I'm going to do some research on Mr. Blume, see what kind of man my wife decided was worth destroying our marriage for." I spent the next 3 hours learning everything I could about Ethan Blume. Social media profiles, professional background, public records. The internet was a beautiful thing when you knew how to use it. What I found was exactly what I'd expected. A 31-year-old project manager with delusions of grandeur and a lifestyle that seemed to exceed his salary by a considerable margin. His Instagram was full of photos from expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, and a BMW that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. More interesting were the gaps in his employment history and the fact that his LinkedIn profile had been edited multiple times in the past year, each time removing references to previous positions. My phone buzzed with a text from Roddy. "Got the photos. They went in at 8:47. Still there as of midnight. Want me to stick around?" "No, come by tomorrow. We need to plan phase 2. I closed my laptop and headed upstairs to bed. Nola's pillow still smelled like her perfume, that unfamiliar scent that now made my stomach turn. As I lay there in the dark, listening to the house settle around me, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. For the first time since discovering Nola's betrayal, I was looking forward to tomorrow, because tomorrow the real audit would begin. The company gala was Nola's idea, naturally. "It's important for my career," she'd said 3 weeks earlier, back when I still believed her lies about late nights and client dinners. "All the senior management will be there. It's a chance for you to meet the people I work with." Now, standing in the bathroom of our hotel room at the Westin downtown, adjusting my tie for the third time, I realized she'd probably invited me as cover. Nothing says faithful wife like bringing your husband to a company party where you can introduce him to your lover. The irony was delicious. "Almost ready?" Nola called from the bedroom. She'd been getting dressed for over an hour, changing outfits twice before settling on a red cocktail dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. For Ethan's benefit, no doubt. 2 minutes, I called back, taking one last look at myself in the mirror. I looked good, better than I had in months. The new haircut Roddy had suggested made me look younger, and the charcoal suit I'd bought specifically for tonight fit perfectly. If I was going to war, I wanted to look like a winner. The ballroom of the Westin was everything I'd expected from a corporate event. Too much lighting, too little personality, and enough forced networking to make a used car salesman uncomfortable. Nola guided me through the crowd, introducing me to colleagues whose names I immediately forgot and whose handshakes felt like auditions for sincerity. "And this is my husband, Porter," became her refrain, delivered with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. I played the part of the supportive spouse, asking polite questions about quarterly targets and office restructuring while scanning the room for Ethan Blume. I spotted him near the bar, exactly as I'd expected from his social media photos. Tall, lean, with the kind of carefully casual style that screamed, "I spent 2 hours making this look effortless." He was talking to a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd clawed her way to the top of whatever corporate ladder she'd chosen to climb. When he laughed at something she said, I caught a glimpse of perfect teeth that had definitely required orthodontic intervention. "Who's that?" I asked Nola, nodding toward Ethan. She followed my gaze, and I watched her face carefully. The slight flush in her cheeks, the way her hand tightened on my arm. She was good at hiding her reactions, but not perfect. "Ethan Blume," she said, her voice steady. "Project manager. And that's Cassie Dorsey, our HR director." "Should we go say hello?" "Maybe later. I want to introduce you to my boss first." Liam Dorsey turned out to be everything I'd expected from Nola's descriptions. Mid-40s, expensive suit, the kind of cold confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. He was holding court near the windows overlooking the harbor, surrounded by a small group of employees who laughed at his jokes with the desperate enthusiasm of people who knew their mortgages depended on his approval. "Liam," Nola said as we approached, "I'd like you to meet my husband, Porter." Liam's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Porter, good to finally meet you. Nola talks about you all the time." "All good things, I hope." "Of course. She tells me you're in supply chain consulting. Fascinating field." We made small talk for a few minutes about logistics and efficiency optimization, topics that would have bored me to tears under normal circumstances but now felt like reconnaissance. I was learning about the company culture, the power dynamics, the relationships that mattered. That's when Liam surprised me. "Nola, would you mind getting me another scotch? And maybe check on the presentation set up for later?" It was clearly a dismissal, and Nola recognized it as such. She squeezed my arm. "I'll be right back." As soon as she was out of earshot, Liam moved closer to me, his expression shifting to something more serious. "Your wife is crossing lines at work," he said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting something like this. "Excuse me?" "I don't like to get involved in personal matters, but what she's doing affects the entire team, the relationship with Ethan, the way she's been handling client accounts, the corners she's been cutting. It's becoming a problem." Before I could respond, Nola appeared at my elbow with Liam's scotch. She must have sensed the tension because her smile looked forced. "What are you two talking about?" "I was just telling your husband about some of the challenges we're facing in the recruiting department," Liam said smoothly. Nola's face went pale. "Porter, this is my husband." Liam looked at her with something that might have been pity. Not for long, I'd imagine. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I felt the red liquid drain from my face as the implications hit me. Around us, conversations continued. Glasses clinked, people laughed. But our little corner of the room had become a pocket of absolute silence. Nola's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Liam, I think we've all said enough for one evening," Liam interrupted. He turned to me with something that might have been respect. "Porter, it was a pleasure meeting you. I suspect we'll be speaking again soon." He walked away, leaving Nola and me standing there in the wreckage of whatever pretense we'd been maintaining. "Porter, I can explain." "Can you?" I kept my voice low, but I could feel the anger radiating from me like heat from a furnace. "Because I'd love to hear how you explain away months of lies, secret phones, and hotel rooms with your coworker." Her face crumpled. "How did you—" "No." "Jesus, Nola, you left your burner phone on the kitchen counter. Did you think I was blind, or just stupid?" People were starting to stare. I could see Ethan across the room, his face a mask of barely controlled panic as he realized something was going wrong. "We need to talk about this at home," Nola whispered. "No, I think we need to talk about it right here, right now, in front of all your colleagues, in front of your boss, who apparently knows exactly what kind of person you really are." I raised my voice just enough to carry to the nearby conversations. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to propose a toast." Nola grabbed my arm. "Porter, please don't—" I shook her off and raised my glass. "To my wife Nola, who's taught me so much about dedication to work. The long hours, the weekend conferences, the team building exercises that require hotel rooms, she's really gone above and beyond for this company." The conversations around us had stopped completely. I could see Ethan pushing through the crowd toward us, his face white with panic. "And to Ethan Blume," I continued, looking directly at him as he approached, "who's been such a supportive colleague during these challenging times, really helping Nola work through her projects, sometimes all night long." "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Ethan started. "Has there?" I turned to face him fully, and something in my expression made him take a step back. "Because I have video evidence that suggests you and my wife have been working very closely together, in conference rooms, after hours, with the door locked." The silence was absolute now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, sensing the drama unfolding in the middle of their elegant event. Nola was crying, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. "Porter, please, can we just go home and talk about this?" "Home?" I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "You mean the home you've been lying about every night for months? The home you've been using as a base of operations for your affair?" I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen. "Should I show them the video, Nola? The one you took in conference room C? I'm sure your colleagues would find it very educational." "Mr. Kellor." Cassie Dorsey had appeared beside us, her voice calm and professional. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Why privately?" I asked. "Everyone here works with them. Don't they deserve to know what kind of people they're collaborating with?" I looked around the room at the sea of shocked faces, then back at Nola and Ethan. They stood there like deer in headlights, caught in the full glare of public humiliation. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silent room. "I came here tonight thinking I was going to meet my wife's colleagues. Turns out I was meeting her accomplices." I set my untouched drink on the nearest table and straightened my tie. "Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. I'm sure you'll have plenty to talk about." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Nola calling my name, her voice breaking with desperation. But I didn't turn around. I had work to do, and the real audit was just beginning. Outside in the hotel parking garage, I pulled out my phone and called Roddy. "It's done," I said. "Phase 2 is complete. Time for Phase 3. "How'd it go?" I smiled for the first time in hours. "Better than I hoped. They're both completely exposed now. No more hiding, no more pretending. Everyone knows exactly what they are. What's next? Now we destroy them properly. Meet me tomorrow morning. We have a lot of work to do." As I drove home through the empty streets, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Satisfaction. The look on their faces when I'd called them out publicly, the shocked silence of their colleagues, the way they'd stood there with nowhere to hide. It was better than any revenge fantasy I'd imagined. But it was just the beginning. Before I was finished with Nola and Ethan, they'd understand exactly what happened when someone decided to betray Porter Kellor. The audit was far from over. The next morning brought a text from Nola at 6:47 a.m. "Stayed at Maya's last night. We need to talk." I deleted it without responding. Roddy arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, carrying 2 large coffees and a folder thick enough to choke a horse. He found me in my home office, surrounded by printed emails, bank statements, and a legal pad covered in what probably looked like the scribblings of a madman. "Jesus, Porter, you look like hell." "I feel fantastic." And I did. For the first time in months, I had a clear purpose, a defined mission. "What did you find?" Roddy opened his folder and spread the contents across my desk. "Your boy Ethan's got problems, big ones." The first document was a credit report that made my eyes widen. Ethan Blume was drowning in debt. Credit cards maxed out, student loans in forbearance, a car payment that consumed nearly a third of his monthly income. How'd you get this? Let's just say I know people who know people. The point is, your wife's boyfriend is living way beyond his means. That BMW, leased. The fancy apartment, he's 3 months behind on rent. The expensive dinners and weekend trips, all going on credit cards. I studied the numbers, my supply chain analyst brain automatically calculating the trajectory. He's heading for bankruptcy within 6 months. Gets better. Roddy pulled out another set of documents. I did some digging into his employment history. Remember those gaps in his LinkedIn profile? Turns out he was fired from his last 2 jobs. Harassment at the first one, embezzlement at the second. Embezzlement? Nothing criminal was filed, but the company made him pay back $8,000 in misappropriated funds before they'd give him a reference. Your wife's company probably doesn't know about any of this. I leaned back in my chair, processing the information. Nola hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been cheating on me with a broke, desperate criminal who was probably using her to solve his financial problems. There's more, Roddy continued. I followed him last night after the gala. Want to guess where he went? Surprise me. Foxwoods Casino. Stayed until 4 a.m., lost about $2,000 at the blackjack tables. Your boy's got a gambling problem on top of everything else. The pieces were falling into place. Ethan wasn't just having an affair with Nola, he was using her. The expensive dinners, the hotel rooms, probably even some of his rent money was coming from her, which meant it was coming from our joint accounts. What about work? I asked. That's where it gets interesting. Roddy pulled out his phone and showed me a series of photos. I spent yesterday afternoon in the coffee shop across from their office building. Took these through a telephoto lens. The photos showed Ethan and Nola in what appeared to be a heated argument outside the building. Her body language was defensive, his aggressive. In one shot, he had his hand on her arm in a grip that looked anything but gentle. Trouble in paradise? Roddy asked. Looks like it. Probably panicking after last night. My phone rang. Cassie Dorsey's name appeared on the screen. Mrs. Dorsey? Mr. Kellor, I was wondering if you might have time to meet today. There are some things we need to discuss regarding last night's incident. I'm available whenever works for you. How about lunch? Bistro 33 on Newbury Street, 1 o'clock. After I hung up, Roddy raised an eyebrow. The HR director? Liam's wife. I think she wants to offer me an alliance. Smart woman. What's the play? I looked at the evidence spread across my desk. Months of lies, financial betrayal, and now the revelation that Nola had been played by a desperate criminal. The anger I'd felt since discovering her affair was crystallizing into something colder, more focused. The play is total destruction, I said, but we're going to do it by the book. No violence, nothing illegal, nothing that comes back on us. We're going to use their own actions to destroy them. Bistro 33 was exactly the kind of place where Boston's professional class went to conduct business over overpriced salads. Cassie Dorsey was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, looking like she'd stepped off the cover of a business magazine. Mr. Kellor, thank you for coming. Please call me Porter, and thank you for reaching out. She waited until the server had taken our orders before getting down to business. I want to start by saying that what happened last night was unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected. Meaning? Meaning Liam and I have been aware of the situation between your wife and Mr. Blume for several weeks. We've been debating how to handle it. I leaned forward. What kind of situation are we talking about exactly? Cassie opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. The kind that violates company policy, creates liability issues, and potentially involves misuse of company resources. She slid the folder across the table. Inside were printouts of emails between Nola and Ethan, expense reports for business trips that looked suspiciously like romantic getaways, and hotel receipts that had been submitted for reimbursement. They've been using company funds for personal travel, Cassie explained, submitting false expense reports, claiming personal meals as business dinners, even billing the company for hotel rooms during their encounters. I studied the documents, my anger building with each page. This is fraud. It's certainly grounds for termination. The question is how to proceed. What are my options? Cassie smiled, and it was the expression of a predator who'd found wounded prey. Well, we could handle this internally. Quiet termination, no criminal charges, everyone moves on with their lives. Or we could make this very public. Full investigation, criminal referrals, civil suits for recovery of misappropriated funds, the kind of thing that follows people for the rest of their careers. I closed the folder and looked across the table at this woman who was offering to help me destroy my wife's life. What do you get out of this? A clean company. Liam's been looking for an excuse to restructure the recruiting department anyway. This gives him the justification he needs. And personally? Her smile turned cold. I don't like people who think the rules don't apply to them. Your wife and Mr. Blume have been flaunting their affair, lying to supervisors, stealing from the company, and creating a hostile work environment for everyone around them. They deserve whatever happens to them. I thought about Nola's tears the night before, her desperate pleas for privacy, the way she'd grabbed my arm to stop me from exposing them further. Then I thought about months of lies, secret phones, and hotel rooms paid for with our money. What do you need from me? Nothing. Just don't interfere. Liam's calling them both in tomorrow morning. By noon, they'll be unemployed and facing potential criminal charges. What about references? Future employment? Oh, what about them? Cassie's smile was razor sharp. Word travels fast in our industry. By the end of the week, everyone in Boston recruiting will know exactly why they were terminated. I reached across the table and shook her hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. That evening, I was sitting in my living room when Nola finally came home. She looked like she'd aged 5 years since the gala, her face pale, her eyes red from crying, her usually perfect hair hanging limp around her shoulders. We need to talk, she said. Do we? Porter, please. I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but we can work through this. I muted the television and looked at her fully. Work through what exactly? The affair? The lies? The fact that you've been stealing from our joint accounts to fund your relationship with a gambling addict who's been fired from his last 2 jobs for harassment and embezzlement? Her face went white. How do you? No? Because unlike you, I'm good at my job. When I audit something, I find everything. She sat down heavily in the chair across from me. It's not what you think. It's not? Then explain it to me. Explain the hotel receipts. Explain the expense reports you've been falsifying. Explain how you thought you could lie to my face for months and I'd never figure it out. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. Bullshit. The word came out harder than I'd intended. Affairs don't just happen. You made a choice. Every lie, every secret phone call, every night you came home smelling like another man, those were choices. She started crying again, but this time I felt nothing. No sympathy, no urge to comfort her, nothing but cold satisfaction. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I'll end it with Ethan. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. No, we can't. Because tomorrow morning, you and Ethan are going to be fired. By tomorrow afternoon, you'll probably be facing criminal charges for fraud. By the end of the week, everyone in your industry will know exactly what kind of person you are. She looked up at me with genuine shock. What are you talking about? I'm talking about consequences, Nola, the thing you never thought you'd have to face. My phone buzzed with a text from Roddy. Package delivered. Check your email. I opened my laptop and found a video file. Security footage from the office building, showing Nola and Ethan in various compromising positions over the past several months. Conference rooms, supply closets, even what appeared to be Liam's office after hours. You want to see what I know? I turned the laptop around so she could see the screen. This is from the building's security system. Apparently they keep everything. She stared at the footage, her face cycling through expressions of horror, disbelief, and finally, resignation. How did you get this? Does it matter? The point is everyone's going to see it. Your boss, HR, probably the police when they investigate the expense account fraud. She closed the laptop and looked at me with something that might have been respect mixed with fear. You planned all of this? I conducted a thorough audit, just like I would for any other project. What happens now? I stood up and headed for the stairs. Now you face the consequences of your choices. All of them. Porter, wait. What about us? What about our marriage? I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked back at her. She sat there in our living room, surrounded by the life we'd built together, finally understanding that it was all about to disappear. There is no us, Nola. There hasn't been for months. You made sure of that. As I climbed the stairs to pack her belongings, I heard her phone ring, probably Ethan calling to panic about tomorrow's meeting with HR. Let them panic. Let them scramble and scheme and try to find a way out of the trap they'd built for themselves. Because tomorrow, the audit would be complete and Porter Kellor would finally have his revenge. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that makes Boston beautiful and unforgiving in equal measure. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen at 7 a.m. when my phone started buzzing with increasingly frantic texts from Nola. HR wants to see me at 9. Do you know anything about this? Porter, please call me. Something's wrong. They're asking about expense reports. What did you tell them? I deleted each message without responding. At 8:30, I drove to the Starbucks across from Nola's office building and settled in at a window table with a clear view of the entrance. Roddy joined me 5 minutes later, carrying a newspaper and wearing the satisfied expression of a man who'd slept well. "Big day," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "The biggest." At 8:45, I watched Ethan Blume walk into the building. Even from across the street, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept checking his phone. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. Nola arrived at 8:52, 3 minutes before her meeting with HR. She paused outside the building, staring up at the glass facade like she was seeing it for the first time. Or the last time. My phone rang. Cassie Dorsey. "They're both here," she said without preamble. "Liam's starting with your wife in 5 minutes." "What's the plan?" "Straightforward termination meeting. We'll present the evidence, give them a chance to respond, then escort them out of the building. Security will be present." "What about the criminal charges?" "That depends on how cooperative they are. If they admit to the expense account fraud and agree to make restitution, we might handle it internally. If they try to lie their way out of it, they'll lie. It's what they do." Cassie's laugh was cold. "Then they'll face the full consequences." At 9:47, Ethan Blume emerged from the building carrying a cardboard box and looking like he'd been hit by a truck. His face was pale, his expensive suit wrinkled, and he moved with the mechanical precision of someone in shock. Nola appeared 20 minutes later, also carrying a box, also looking devastated. But where Ethan looked broken, Nola looked angry. She stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, staring back at the building, her jaw set in an expression I recognized from 8 years of marriage. She was planning something. My phone buzzed with a text. "This isn't over. You'll regret what you've done." I showed the message to Roddy, who shook his head. "Some people never learn." "What do you mean?" "I mean she's about to make this a lot worse for herself." He was right. Over the next hour, I watched from the coffee shop as Nola made a series of increasingly desperate phone calls. From her body language and facial expressions, none of them were going well. At 11:30, she walked into the Starbucks. I'd been expecting this confrontation, but I still felt my pulse quicken as she approached our table. Up close, she looked even worse. Mascara smudged, hair disheveled, the kind of barely controlled desperation that comes from watching your life implode in real time. Porter. "Nola, how'd the meeting go?" She ignored the question and focused on Roddy. "Who's this?" "This is my friend Roddy. He's been helping me with my research project." Something in my tone must have warned her, because her eyes narrowed. "Research project?" "The audit. You know, the one where I investigated every aspect of your affair and found evidence of expense account fraud, company policy violations, and enough material to destroy both your careers." She sat down uninvited, her hands shaking as she placed them on the table. "You did this. You planned all of this." "I documented what you did. There's a difference. You're destroying my life over a mistake." "A mistake?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but letting the anger show. "Months of lying isn't a mistake, Nola. Stealing company money to fund your affair isn't a mistake. Recording yourself having closeness in your boss's office isn't a mistake. Those are choices." Her face crumpled. "It meant nothing. Ethan meant nothing. It was just, I don't know, excitement. Something different." "Different from what? From our marriage? From the life we built together?" "From being boring." The words exploded out of her with surprising vehemence. "From being the wife of a supply chain consultant who thinks a wild Friday night is trying a new restaurant. From pretending that our safe, predictable, utterly mundane life was enough." The honesty was brutal, but also liberating. For the first time since discovering her affair, I understood what had really happened. This wasn't about love or passion or some grand romantic gesture. This was about a woman who'd gotten bored with her life and decided to blow it up rather than have an adult conversation about what she needed. "So you decided to have an affair with a broke gambling addict who's been fired from his last 2 jobs for criminal behavior. How do you know about—" She stopped, realization dawning. "You investigated him too." "I investigated everything. Did you know he owes over $80,000 in gambling debts? Did you know he's been using you to pay his rent? Did you know that half the romantic dinners you've been bragging about were actually him hitting you up for money?" The color drained from her face. "That's not true." Roddy slid a folder across the table. "Bank records. Your joint account has been funding his lifestyle for months. The cash withdrawals, the transfers to his account, even the credit card payments, it's all there." She opened the folder with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the documents. With each page, her expression grew more horrified. "He told me he was between bonuses," she whispered. He said his company was slow to process expense reimbursements. He lied, just like you lied to me. She closed the folder and looked up at me with something that might have been respect mixed with fear. What do you want from me? Nothing. This isn't about what I want anymore. This is about consequences. What kind of consequences? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. Ethan's already been arrested. Turns out when HR called his previous employers to verify his background, they discovered he never paid back that embezzlement money. There's an outstanding warrant. Her mouth fell open. Arrested? About an hour ago. He's being held on fraud charges in 2 states, plus the new charges from your company. His bail hearing is tomorrow, assuming he can find someone willing to post bond. But You what? Love him? He's been using you, Nola. You were never his girlfriend. You were his mark. She sat there in stunned silence, processing the complete destruction of her fantasy. Around us, the coffee shop continued its normal rhythm, students studying, business people having meetings, ordinary people living ordinary lives that suddenly seemed precious in their simplicity. What happens to me? She finally asked. That depends. Cassie says if you cooperate fully and make restitution for the misappropriated funds, they might not press criminal charges. How much? $12,000, plus interest. She laughed, a broken sound that drew stares from nearby tables. I don't have $12,000. Then you'll face the same charges as Ethan. Porter, please. I know I hurt you, but we were married for 8 years. That has to count for something. I looked at this woman I'd once loved, sitting across from me in ruins of her own making, and felt nothing. No anger, no sympathy, no lingering affection. Just a cold satisfaction that justice had been served. It does count for something, I said. It's why I'm giving you this warning, instead of letting you find out about the criminal charges when the police show up at your door. I stood up, Roddy following suit. The divorce papers will be served tomorrow. I'm keeping the house, the cars, and all the joint accounts. You can keep whatever's in your personal account and whatever you can carry in a suitcase. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. As we walked toward the door, she called after me. Porter, wait. I turned back one last time. I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry for all of it. I know you are, but sorry doesn't undo 8 months of lies. Sorry doesn't give me back the marriage I thought I had. Sorry doesn't make you a different person than you turned out to be. Outside on the sidewalk, Roddy clapped me on the shoulder. How do you feel? I thought about it as we walked back to my car. How did I feel? Not triumphant, exactly. Not even particularly satisfied. Mostly, I felt free. I feel like the audit's complete, I said. 3 days later, I was sitting in my kitchen reading the morning paper when Mrs. Callahan knocked on my door. She stood on my porch holding a plate of cookies and wearing the expression of someone bursting with gossip. Porter, dear, I heard about Nola. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. I appreciate that. If you need anything, meals, someone to talk to, help with the house, you just let me know. Actually, there is something you can help me with. Oh? I smiled, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. I'm thinking about throwing a party, a celebration of new beginnings. Think the neighbors would be interested? Mrs. Callahan's eyes lit up. Oh, I think they'd be very interested. Very interested indeed. As I watched her hurry back to her house to start spreading the news, I realized that Nola had been right about one thing. Our old life had been boring, predictable, safe. But boring wasn't the worst thing in the world. Boring was honest. Boring was faithful. Boring was building something real instead of chasing fantasies that turned out to be lies. And if I ever decided I wanted something more exciting than boring, I'd have an adult conversation about it instead of blowing up my life and destroying the people who trusted me. My phone buzzed with a text from Roddy. Ethan made bail. Nola posted it. I deleted the message without responding. Whatever happened between them now was their business. My audit was complete, my life was my own again, and Porter Kellor was finally ready to move forward. The revenge was over. The healing could begin.